President Obama talks tougher on ISIS, saying the plan now forming will take time. Meantime, his Secretary of State says U.S. troops on the ground is the red line this administration won't cross. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. President Obama says a strategy on dealing with ISIS terrorists in Syria is developing, and he repeated several times his ultimate objective of defeating the terrorist army that has now overtaken much of Syria and Iraq. But the pronouncement has left some lawmakers unconvinced of both the president's commitment and his ability to rally international support. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is traveling with the president and reports tonight from the NATO summit in Wales.
While it took 3 news conferences in 8 days to get there, President Obama finally got his message straight on battling ISIS.
To degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL. We are going to degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL. You systematically degrade their capabilities.
As the president hit those talking points again and again, there were no more admissions that he does not have a strategy, and not a word about how the terrorists could become a manageable problem.
You can't contain an organization that is running roughshod through that much territory, causing that much havoc, displacing that many people, killing that many innocents, enslaving that many women. The goal has to be to dismantle them.
So he finally settled on dismantle and destroy as the goal, though the big question will be whether the president and his team can follow through on a strategy to achieve it, with top Republicans charging the president's failure to target ISIS's terrorist training camps over the Iraqi border into Syria has already given ISIS an edge.
The fact that we have let this go, and especially over the last 7-8 months, as we've watched these columns of ISIS fighters travel city by city and have not hit them by the air, this is irresponsible.
There also continues to appear to be daylight between the president and General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. While the president claimed he did not have a military strategy yet to deal with ISIS in Syria because he was waiting on the Pentagon, Dempsey suggested otherwise in a Facebook town hall yesterday, saying, quote, "At the president's direction, we have developed a military strategy with a series of options on how we can initially contain, continue to disrupt, and ultimately defeat ISIL." The day before in Estonia, the president implied again that the military was still tweaking the plan, stressing it was all about getting the details right.
It is very important from my perspective that when we send our pilots in to do a job, that we know that this is a mission that's going to work, that we're very clear on what our objectives are, what our targets are.
The differing statements among senior officials continued today, with Secretary of State John Kerry saying ISIS can be defeated, but it may take years. Kerry declaring, quote, "It may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, but we're determined it has to happen." While the president has also said it will take a long time, earlier this week a top Pentagon official suggested otherwise.
I don't think that this is a threat that's going to be in terms of years and years and years, but it's certainly one that we have to worry about right now.
To show he's getting serious about taking on ISIS, the president said again today he's sending Kerry to the Mideast to help build a coalition with Arab nations. Though first the commander-in-chief was thinking about his bucket list, making a pit stop at prehistoric Stonehenge before hustling back to Washington.
Now, about that coalition, a U.S. official tells us they now have 9 other nations providing support in Iraq, but still no coalition for Syria. Secretary Kerry saying today that when it comes to the support in Iraq, there will be no U.S. combat troops on the ground in Iraq, calling it a, quote, red line, although, of course, other red lines have been flexible. Brett?
Ed Henry live in Wales at the NATO summit. Ed, thank you. Please join me tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, for an in-depth and exclusive look at what really happened when terrorists attacked the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi, Libya, 2 years and 6 days ago. Last night, we showed you an excerpt featuring 3 men who fought in the battle. Tonight, reaction on Capitol Hill and throughout Washington to what we heard. Here's Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel.
I said, hey, we're ready to go. Bob looks right through me and looks at the team leader and goes, you guys need to wait.
The name Bob refers to the CIA station chief who hoped local Libyan militiamen would help defend the American diplomatic facility.
If I gave you that 30 minutes back, would Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith be alive today?
Yes, they would still be alive. My gut is yes.
Today, the chair of the new Benghazi Select Committee said, quote, the committee has heard of these concerns and they go to the heart of why Congress established this committee to determine all of the facts of what happened in Benghazi before, during, and after the terrorist attack that day. California Democrat Senator Barbara Boxer has referred to the Benghazi probe as a witch hunt and wasn't impressed by the latest revelations.
You don't need a congressional investigation about a tragedy and try to turn a tragedy into a scandal. Benghazi was a tragedy. Mistakes were made. They've been corrected.
The top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee said, quote, although some security officers voiced a greater urgency to depart for the compound, no evidence was ever found by the committee that CIA personnel were ever told to stand down. Those who were in Benghazi during the attack who eventually went to the scene disobeying their orders to continue waiting disagree.
It happened that night. That happened. We were told to wait and stand down. We were delayed 3 times.
At the State Department, spokesperson Marie Harf says there was good reason for a delay.
The notion that there was evidence of a stand-down order given by anybody, including the CIA chief on the ground in Benghazi, is false. There's no evidence to back it up.
They said wait up to 30 minutes before they went in, though, so you're not disputing that.
To get backup and additional weapons. So when they did engage, they had additional, again, weapons and backup and resources to fight back.
You're not disputing that the guy on the ground in Benghazi said hold off. You're just disputing that it was a stand-down order. And
those are two very different
I know,
things.
But you're also saying that this hold off or wait 30 minutes or whatever it was didn't come from Washington at all. It came from the local person on the ground.
Correct, who said, let's assess the situation, let's get you guys more weapons and more backup.
But no one in D.C. said hold off for 30 minutes.
Not that I found any evidence of.
I'd strongly believe if we'd have left immediately, they'd still be alive today.
A key Republican member of the House Oversight Committee says officials should not rush to attack the messengers.
It's almost 2 years since the attack on their facility in Benghazi, and we've never heard from somebody on the ground in Benghazi the night of the attack. That's just absolutely stunning. So I look forward to hearing what these people have to say. We should be patting them on the back and thanking them for their service to this country. I think they've deserved it.
Fox News has learned the House Select Committee on Benghazi will hold its first public hearing the week of September 14th. It'll examine the State Department's Accountability Review Board, which looked into the attack and the aftermath. Brett?
Okay, Mike, thank you. Also in that special tonight, a look at the wives of those men who risked their lives to protect fellow Americans in Benghazi. These 3 brave women also carried a heavy burden as their husbands battled terrorism far from home.
Turned on the news and there it was. You know, 4 Americans had been dead and 2 were unidentified. And I'm like, you know, he hasn't called me. I tried texting him. I tried calling him. You know, began to cry and I just hit my knees and prayed.
In past experience, if I start panicking right away, then I just get myself worked up. So I just tried to not worry about it. And I thought, well, I'll hear from him in the morning or the next evening.
There was a ticker on the bottom of whatever news channel it was, and it said something to the effect that there was an attack on the annex in Benghazi. And my heart dropped. And I'm like, gosh, how am I going to tell the kids? And that was my first reaction.
Fox News reporting 13 hours at Benghazi. The Inside Story premieres tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll also run throughout the weekend. President Obama says a ceasefire agreed to today in Ukraine can only work if Russia stops violating Ukrainian sovereignty. And he's taking credit for bringing Russia to the bargaining table. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has details from the Pentagon.
Just hours before Ukraine and Russian representatives signed a ceasefire in Minsk, tension around Ukraine's strategic port of Mariupol remained high.
You heard the sound of the Grad rockets for yourself. You heard them. They're firing. You see?
A day before, locals said they saw more Russian tanks arriving. Ukraine's president announced the ceasefire after meeting with Western leaders at the NATO summit in Wales.
Now it is very important that this ceasefire lasts long, and during this ceasefire we continue the political dialogue. We can find who can bring the peace and stability on.
Russian-backed rebels said despite the ceasefire, they would not stop their attempts to break away from Ukraine.
This ceasefire doesn't mean that our course, that we are preparing, that our course to in some ways secede, is over.
In closing remarks at the NATO summit, President Obama said the only reason the Russian-backed fighters agreed to a ceasefire is because of U.S. and European sanctions, and vowed to continue drawing up further sanctions targeting Russia's defense, financial, and energy sectors, just in case.
And obviously we are hopeful, but based on past experience also skeptical, that in fact the separatists will follow through and the Russians will stop violating Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
While we meet here in Newport, a package of sanctions is being finalized in Brussels that will further increase the economic cost to Russia for its behavior.
The NATO allies announced the creation of a new rapid response force made up of 4,000 troops.
It sends a clear message to any potential aggressor. Should you even think of attacking one ally, you will be facing the whole alliance.
The problem for Ukraine is that it is not a member of the alliance.
Part of the ceasefire agreement includes an exchange of nearly 1,000 Ukrainian and Russian prisoners. Russia's ambassador to Ukraine was a signatory to the deal. Prisoner exchanges could begin as early as tomorrow, Brett.
Jennifer, what can you tell us about this chartered plane that left Afghanistan? It had 100 Americans on board and then was forced to land in Iran.
Well, U.S. defense officials say shortly after leaving Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, the Fly Dubai aircraft was ordered to land in Bandar Abbas by the Iranians, who apparently were not notified of its intended flight path. Officials say the aircraft was delayed on the ground in Afghanistan and the company failed to file a new flight plan. It was not forced down by Iranian fighter jets as first reported. The company says it's sending a new aircraft to pick up the American passengers. It's unclear why they can't use the first plane. Brett.
Okay, interesting. Jennifer, thank you. Up next, why the job market may be going in the wrong direction. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. WSVN in Miami, where a memorial service was held today for Steven Sotloff, the American journalist beheaded by ISIS terrorists, on a video released earlier this week. Sotloff's parents live in that area. Fox 42 in Omaha, where the Nebraska Supreme Court heard arguments on a case involving the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. At issue is whether the legislature improperly gave the governor authority to approve the project instead of the Public Service Commission. And this is a live look at Memphis from our affiliate there, Fox 13. The big story there tonight, talk about a bucket list item. 93-year-old Blanche Berner said she wanted to skydive, so her family set it up. She jumped with the chef from her retirement home. Both landed safely. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.